really excited about our speakers tonight. First up is going to be Andy McAfee. Andy has been, Andy right here. He's been our gallery director for going on 16 years now, and has spent his entire working career in fine art. He's a sought-after speaker and instructor at our industry trade shows around the country, and he speaks to all types of organizations here in Greensboro. This topic tonight will be about preserving and appraising your artwork. Andy's seen just about everything come through the doors, and he can help guide you on taking care and preserving your art for future generations. Then we have Dennis Stearns. Dennis, as most of you know, is the president of Stearns Financial Group right here in Greensboro. Dennis is one of the leading scenario planners and futurists in the financial planning industry. Also a very highly sought-after speaker, highly respected in his field, speaks all over the country and internationally as well. And tonight he's going to talk about investment trends in art and how to view art from a financial planning perspective. And then, even more importantly than that, I hope that at the end he'll talk about the greatest and most epic tennis match that has ever been played, involving myself and Dennis, and it's really a match that's become a legend in our own minds. And then to finish the evening tonight, we have the director of the Weatherspoon Art Gallery, Nancy Dahl. Nancy has a wealth of background and expertise in the art industry and closely follows the national and international trends in art. She's going to be discussing trends in contemporary art, as well as some issues involving museums and auction houses. That should be really interesting. We'll try to keep each presentation to about 20 minutes. That will leave about a half an hour for Q&A, either during the presentation or afterwards. We'll leave that up to each speaker, and we'll try to get you out of here by 7:30. So again, thank you for choosing to spend this time with us tonight. We really appreciate it. Hope you find it informative. And with that, it's all yours, Andy.
Thank you for that great introduction. I'm Andy. I have a degree in art marketing from Appalachian State. I graduated in '90. After a 5-year stint with the local artist William Mangum, I broadened my horizons and came to the art shop. And we built this in 2000. We went international, which was exciting. A lot of our work comes in from all over the world, and a lot of it goes back out again, and people are always bringing new things. Today I had 2 people bring me things. Unfortunately, one was an offset lithograph print, wasn't worth too much, and the other one was a starving artist sale. I think they got that from, and I have to give some low appraisals sometimes, but everybody has 3 questions. What is it? What is it worth? And what do I do with it? You know, how do I preserve it if it's worth something? Probably about 90% of what I look at is not worth pursuing or preserving. But there are some jewels that we get in, and we've done a lot of antique road shows, and there's two big differences between preservation and restoration. Preservation is usually not too expensive, and that I'm going to show you both the oils and paper art, how to preserve it. Restoration can get more expensive because you need a professional restorer. By the time it gets into restoration, it's not been taken care of. If you had an automobile, say you had a nice Mercedes, and you had it for 10 years and you never waxed it, never cleaned it, you wouldn't be preserving it anymore. You'd be taking it and having it restored. And artwork's the same way. It sits on your wall 20, 30, 40 years. It was in your grandmother's house. People smoked. Bugs got in it. But it's happening so slowly that you don't see that the colors are changing, that the paint is cracking, and it's just like us getting older. I look the same to myself every day, but I guarantee you I'm getting older because I've been doing this a long time. So I'm going to start off. There's 2 very different things that I look at, and one is canvases, and I wanted to show you that first. And the first thing I wanted to talk about is preservation. Some artists now, when you buy an oil painting and you walk into a gallery and you buy it, odds are that it's less than 6 months old and it has not been varnished yet. A lot of artists now, like Paulson, he'll actually mix a varnish into his paint. Not everybody, a lot of restorers don't recommend that just because you can't take the varnish off, clean it, and put new varnish on it. But what happens when you're in a marketplace, it comes to me and it's good for about 20 to 30 years without any, you don't need to, this is not going to dry out. You can tell by the richness of the colors and by the gloss that this has a nice coating on it. It's actually within the paint, it's not on top. But this piece, I would not need to come out and get this for another 20, 30 years. At that point, it would probably need just a light cleaning and then another coat of varnish on top. The other artwork we get, and I only did half of this, but the other artwork, like Richard Johnson works in oil, but he does not put any kind of varnish within his paints. And I don't know if you can see it in the light, but you can see the difference of the richness of this side. And this is a brand new painting. This painting is about 6 months old, but it was time for me to take it off the wall and varnish it. The artists don't tell us to, but if you purchase this and it wasn't varnished, within about 5 to 10 years you would notice some cracking and drying. And the biggest problem is this side, if I spilled something on it or smoke got on it, I could clean that varnish right off and put a new coat on, just like a wax on your car. This side, it's going to be within the paint, and when you clean the paint, you're going to lose some paint. So once a painting's been restored without varnish, they can get lighter, and we've had even professional restorers not be able to get damage off a painting. So, and it's very rare that you have paintings that are half done, because usually you just see them and they're all glossy and beautiful, and you never realize that there's any real difference in a painting. To preserve this, it could be a $60 charge or something. To restore it would easily be $400 to $500. So it just depends on whether you want to take care of it now or whether you want to deal with it later. But eventually, most paintings do come back to me if they're of value. Now this is a 200 at least year old painting. We know that because we had it looked at. The back was done with the bars to keep it from keep it from warping. It's missing a lot of it now. But this came in and he was very dark and yellow. But this is this is what our restorer did. And this is King Lear. But it's an extremely old piece. But you can see the detail in the wheat and the color. And when you look at a piece, artists didn't paint in dark yellows and sheep you couldn't see in the mist. It's just the age of the piece and the dirt getting on it that will change the look. And in the last 30 years they've invented varnishes that don't yellow. But 100 years ago they're using they're using egg yolk, they're using different products, sap from trees and things. Delmar is like a sap from a tree, and it yellows over time. You know how it's clear at first, but it is going to. Nowadays they have synthetic sprays and things that are going to stay white and clear, but anything that's over 30 years old is going to be yellow either from the varnish or from the age. There's no way around it. This is a painting. She came in, and they didn't think there was much wrong with it, but they wanted to get it cleaned. And you can come up afterwards, but there was all this intricate, her dress was white with all this intricate patterns in there, and you could barely see it before we did that. The halo around her head was so vibrant, and she had a white complexion. People, paintings that are 100 years old, if they have not been restored at some point, they'll get a really dark complexion, and that is just the age. That's not actually the way the artist wanted it to be. This is actually a painting that somebody who worked here, she found it laying out on the track. We wanted a piece to restore to show people what the difference is. This was laying by a trash can, and we thought it would be the perfect one to try to restore. It had a massive hole. The hole on this side was bigger than that side. This is so fragile, and I take it to my talks. I put glass over the front. It is a canvas, but I was afraid I'd put a hole in it just trying to get it in and out of the van. This piece I own. A lot of these pieces I don't own, so every time I have a talk, I'll have brand new pieces that are in for restoration and cleaning. But this one, because it was in a dumpster, I can show you. But this is the white that the artist meant for it to be. this is how it looked by the time we got to it. No great value on this piece. I mean, there's no great artist or anything. But, you know, if this was your grandmother's piece, you know, and you wanted to keep it for sentimental reasons, we can certainly get it cleaned back up. We can patch the holes and we can put it back together. But if this was properly treated and varnished every 20 to 30 years, it would have just needed a cleaning. This needed this painting with holes and everything in it. You know, it'd probably be a $600–700 job at that point to get it back to where it used to be. And it does affect the value a little bit, because when you have patches on the back and you've got end touching, which is what it's called when you paint over to hide the holes, that will affect value, but you know, if it's done well by a good restorer, it won't. Not as much, but you still would want a perfect piece if possible. The other main thing that I look at, and I do a lot of, if a painting is worth, you know, $3,000 to $4,000 to $5,000, then I need to send it out to Charlotte to have it officially appraised. I can find out, I can tell you what it is, and I can give you an idea of value, but if you need something for your insurance or something, it's about $400 to $500, and you get an official appraisal from my appraiser. But I do a lot of research. I just love it. When somebody brings me something, I just want to find it. And a lot of times what I can find is all they need for their insurance or for their, well, you know, they just want to know what it is. But Lenny actually had somebody bring this in. And this is it's an apparition of Voltaire. And if you look at it just right, you'll see the skull back there. And Salvador Dali has always been one of my favorites. When I was in college, I always did my papers on him, and I just love the surrealists. And I mean, how does he dream this stuff up? I have no idea, because to be a talented artist and be able to do all this has always blown my mind. So a lot of artists, you can kind of see how they do it, or you kind of know they have it. But Dali was always, and the paintings were small. They were in centimeters on panels, and then they, like persistence of memory, they would blow it way up, and it was still an amazing painting, but I saw the original, it was about that big. So you're looking at it, it's always easier to take a big painting and reduce it. It's tougher to take a small painting and blow it up, because you lose some of that detail that you see. So anyways, I told Lenny, I said, I'll look it up, and I did some research on it, and sure enough, I found it on a website, Art Cache, and they're asking $2,400 for it. And I thought that was really good, and I was wondering why the margins on that didn't match this. So then I popped it out, and of course it's a bad sign when it has cardboard on the back, because that's very acidic. So I popped this thing out, and I noticed right away that the margins, unfortunately, have been cropped. It affects value greatly. This is stone lithograph, so it's not an original where you can play with the margins. On a lithograph, people are expecting the original margins and stuff, so that affects the value. And then, to my horror, there was other artwork on the back, and the person that did it super glued it. Didn't even use a glue that I could take off. It was super glued to the back. So this became a $2,400 piece down to a $0 piece. And granted, it might be worth $50 to somebody to hang in their house and say they have a dolly. But as far as real art value, the way they framed it, whoever framed it, destroyed the actual value to it. And I'm always surprised, like, if I don't know who watches, watches Pawn Stars, or who's addicted to those shows, because I know I am. But how they can buy artwork for $7,000 to $10,000 and not open them up first is beyond me, because they could be glued down, there could be anything, there could be bugs living in there. I don't know how they buy it without doing a thorough inspection. So this person asked Lenny what they could now do with it, and I told him if they donated it to my talks that I would show it every time. So this thankfully was donated. I would hate to have lost this piece, because it really shows, how not to do something, unfortunately.
She said it was a gift, but it freaked her out. She didn't like looking at it.
It is creepy, and there's I brought a Rembrandt imitation. It's probably worth a few $100s, but they called it they called it Uncle Charlie, and it would scare the kids because he'd follow you around. And she sold it to me for $50, and he's been over my mantle for about 15 years, and I just love Charlie. But it was freaking her kids out, and they would cry every time Charlie would fall. So one person's creepy is another person's, happiness. This piece just came in last week. This was for another friend of Lenny's, had a full collection, and this was a Chagall. And it took me a while. There was nothing. There was no information with it. So it took me a while to figure out. I mean, I had to go through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Chagall, because Chagall was very prolific. I mean, he did more work than Dali did, I think. And but I finally found the image. And these people, they were asking. It was back in '87 in Moscow. They were asking $6,000 for this exact piece. And again, I actually just opened this piece today, but you can see, and this is actually acid. This isn't. There's a difference. There's stuff you get on there from bugs that are living, foxing. This is actually acid burning through what used to be probably, if it was '80s, probably an $8,000 to $10,000 Chagall.
But mounted on an acid paper. I mean, the paper printed on this is acid-free, but it's mounted on something.
Well, this was actually free-floating in there, and then whoever had framed it originally had this on the back. The scary thing is that it had metal brads and everything on the back of the mat that was up against the artwork. So everything was done wrong as far as the framing on this. But it could have been framed 30, 40 years ago before. I mean, even at the art shop, we've gotten things back that were 80 years old, and obviously they weren't done right because they were too old. I mean, people didn't know about acids back then, and conservation mats and conservation glass and everything. It's a far removed world from where we used to be. But these are our glasses now that we have to choose from. All three of these are 98% UV protectant. And if you have a William Mangum or an old Timberlake, or a lot of these artists, if you think they're worth a lot of money and you don't have conservation glass on it, they're probably not, because they turn blue. Blue's, out of the four colors, blue is the one that stays around the longest. So, and I have a William Mangum that he gave to me. He had a remark on it, #1 for Christmas, and it turned blue because I got it like 20 years ago, and I never put the right glass on it. But this is actually a glass where they then put another coating on it to take the reflection out of it. So you barely, there's less than 1% reflection on a conservation museum glass. This is the type of glass you'd see at the Museum of Modern Art, or a really good piece. If you have a $7,000 etching, to pay a few $100s for a good piece of glass is definitely worth it. Just a few other quick tips on. Chris was nice enough to put these together. Every frame should have sealing tape on it. The frame itself, the wood pulp is very acidic. So if you've really got a nice piece of artwork, you should have the frame should be sealed. You should have this is a little small for everybody to see, but this is perfect right here. Conservation glass. You've got 3 acid-free mats. You've got the different type of hinges. You've got rice hinges, and you've got just the acid-free tape that's fine for most documents and things. And then you've actually got corners that we prefer to use, the acid-free corners that you put on there. And then your backboard is acid-free, your foam core is acid-free, and then it's got a nice strong dust cover on the back to keep everything sealed together. And we've probably been doing this, we've only went to, 5 years, 10 years ago, to the acid-free backboard, where we put acid-free on everything, like the actual foam core is now acid-free. The mats have probably been 15, 20 years. The glass, we just went to conservation glass as a standard about 3, 4 years ago. So everything is slowly getting in line to where if you got something now, if you had an important piece, it would be completely preserved. But anything older than that, you know, is probably going to have some issues within it. Does anybody have any questions for me? Yes?
What is your intake about using recycled plastic in frames? I've seen some frames are made in some type of recycled plastic.
They make a polymer frame, but they just tend to be very inexpensive. If you're in hotels or if you're looking for a frame that's $2, $3 a foot, you know, those are fine. The problem with them is if you ever, the corners, it's not a hardwood, so it's real easy to break the corners off and break pieces off of them. But if you're doing a bunch of frames and you want something inexpensive, they do make them, and they're basically foam frames. They're made out of you know, they're not made out of solid wood, which we prefer, but we hardly ever use them. I have one of 2,000 frames on my wall. I have one frame that's made out of plastic, and we do use that once in a while for corporate jobs and things of that nature. Yes?
You said that like the foam core backing is acid-free, and then the back, the very back part of it, you said.
Yeah, the foam core is the very back, and then you have a mounting board that's acid-free as well.
Okay.
Whenever you pay for a preservation mount, you're getting a backing board with the hinges on it, and then it's backed by acid-free foam core before we put the dust back on it.
And does it make that much difference if it's not touching it or anything?
Anytime what happens, it's slow, but whenever you have gases that are within anything between the backing paper and the glass, anything that has acid is going to gas. So eventually your paper is going to turn a little bit yellow. You know, UV light can do it, and I was talking to this gentleman about watercolors earlier. It's not that the watercolor fades so much, it's that the paper turns a different color. And you'll notice a lot of watercolors, the white is always the paper. So you might have a snow scene that's the snow's all dirty and yellow. That's not what the artist wanted. That's just how the paper reacted to what was inside. Or exterior light, because light can do it, or the materials inside can do it. Anything older than 15, 20 years probably has a cardboard back, and that's extremely rough on any type of artwork. You can kind of see these other ones were framed properly in their day, but they're in very bad condition now because they were never upgraded. And anybody can bring in. I don't charge if you want to bring in a piece and just have me take it apart and look at it. There's absolutely no charge for that. Just to see what's in there, because I like to see what's in there too. We found newspapers, death certificates. We found all kinds of stuff as backing. It's amazing what you'll find sealed up and people writing stuff down. So to me, it's a little treasure every time you open one anyway. So there's absolutely no charge for me just to take a peek. It can be a lot of fun.
The tape you were talking about,
The sealing tape?
The sealing tape. Does that block all the gases from the...
That blocks, you know, almost all of it from the wood. Wood is more, you know, the pulp of the wood is what they make cardboard and everything else from. So wood itself is very acidic. One thing I didn't have time to show you, but like I took this off a piece. The artwork was in front of this. She reframed the artwork so I don't have it anymore. But you can see the browning on the back of this, how it burned right through to this, and then it burned through the 100-year-old piece that she had. The problem with that is the worst thing you can possibly have on artwork for a backing is raw wood. And that, about 100 years ago, that was the most popular way. Until cardboard, the problem is with cardboard is galleries would just cut it off of boxes and stick it on the back. So depending how bad the corrugated cardboard was is how much gassing you would get in there. But wood is even worse than cardboard as far as the backing. So you do want to keep the wood of the frame away from the artwork, if at all possible.
Andy, how about paintings that are on wood?
Well, like that one's on King Lear and stuff's on wood. They've all been, you know, they treat the wood first, they gesso it, or they put up, there's a barrier between the they don't paint directly onto the wood, they usually always put some kind of white. And, you know, different artists that experimented a whole lot, you know, like The Last Supper was just falling off the wall because it was done in, you know, egg tempera and stuff, and it hadn't been taken care of, and, you know, it was literally flaking back off the walls. So there's no guarantee, but I find in all my research and looking at things that things on panel tend to be in the best shape, because canvas can rot, canvas can tear. You know, you might have to reline it. You might have it with holes in it, but panels tend to stand the test of time a lot better than anything else that I've seen. That's if they're properly, you know, if there's a barrier between the painting and the wood. Any other questions? Yes?
What about the medieval paintings that were painted on wood?
I have one that's about 300 years old that were,
I'm sure didn't have anything to protect, or did they?
since the 13th century, they've had different ways. They used egg and they used different stuff. There's hundreds of different things they used, but any good artist was going to have something. They wouldn't just paint on wood. They would prefer to paint on, you know, like more of a white color or something. So they'd use an egg or something to lay down before they would start painting. If they didn't do it right, or if they were a real experimental artist, there could be little left today. You know, there's just some artists out there that there's very little left of because they weren't painted right. Not only were they maybe not taken care of, but the artist was experimenting with egg. I mean, in the day, the artist himself would have to make their own colors. I mean, there's only been paints made for people in the last, you know, couple hundred years. Before that, they'd be grounding up berries, and, you know, and there was whole different styles depending on what kind of materials they would use to make the paint itself. So not only do you have paint that's skeptical, you got they would put wax on the front, you know, wax. Beeswax used to be a main way of preserving a painting once it was done, and they've found old mosaics and stuff with beeswax rubbed on the surface just to protect the paint from drying out, which that has to be removed now. You know, if it still exists, it's got to be removed because it's so yellowed and cracked that it needs to be replaced. But that's the way they used to do it in the day. Yes?
What about something that's painted on rice paper, like they use like the rice paper, that real thin paper?
You know, the Japanese art and stuff, the Oriental art, I don't know too much about it. I know Dali used rice paper. I know that it holds up. It's supposed to be, Dali always did his artist proofs on the rice paper and did his regular edition on regular paper. So it's considered a higher end, and the hinges that we use are actually made out of a rice paper because they're an acid-free. They're the very best hinge. You always take a hinge that's a little bit weaker than the actual art, so it wouldn't tear the art, it would tear the hinge first if you happen to drop it or something. But that rice paper hinge is one of the best ways you can hang a paper piece within a frame. Chris would know a lot more about that than I. I don't do the actual framing. Chris has been doing it for 16 years, so he's an expert on it. If you have any questions afterwards, feel free to ask Chris how he made me these samples and everything. So. We've been working together for about 12 years, and we've both been in the business. I've been in it for 20, and he's been in it for 16. So between us, we can figure most things out. So it works out well. Well, I think my time is up. I don't want to take the whole evening, but thank you for having me. Thank you for coming to the gallery, and we will set it up for Dennis.